Okay.
Hello and welcome to the War Report. Now, we're in a bit of a different format today. We are not doing it live because of our wondrous technical problems. I mean, frankly, we just have the best tech on the show. Honestly, nobody is better than us. But we have quite the episode, and it figures we're not doing this one live because the world decided to fucking explode in the week we've been gone. I mean, this usually happens when I take a week off or something, but no, today it's just different. So about 2 weeks ago, I can't believe I didn't mention this on the show. There was a terrorist attack in Indian-controlled Kashmir, which is that region disputed between India and Pakistan, which, oh boy, we will get into. And pretty much everyone from Israel to Iran to the U.S. to China, pretty much if you were a country, you condemned this terrorist attack by this Pakistani terrorist group. And India blamed Pakistan for not doing enough to curb terrorism, and in response, claimed to have struck a terrorist camp in Pakistan. Now, people who are anti-India, the detractors will say, "Oh, India just struck trees. It was an empty gesture and an unnecessary provocation." Regardless of what actually happened, this has highly escalated into probably one of the dumbest conflicts in recent times. But as for now, the fighting has been brought to a lull. I haven't heard many reports. I mean, pretty much Tuesday, Wednesday, it was very heated. It looked like it was going to get worse. But there's been exchanges of fire, violations of airspace. Both sides have downed each other's aircraft. Now, keep in mind, both of these sides, both these wondrous first world advanced nations possess nuclear weapons. So, yeah, that's something to think about. But you can also consider that neither of them have a no first. Both of them actually have a no first strike policy. Now, the Pakistani prime minister has called for negotiations, but at this point, it's become somewhat of a measuring contest. Neither side is really willing to back down. But to me, this actually looks like the 1999 cargo war, which was from May to July, and it lasted about 2 months, and it was a decisive Indian victory. Now, one thing people have been ignoring about this situation is that Russia is close to India. In fact, they signed an arms deal in October. We covered this back in October. And Pakistan's grown close to China over the past few years. Now, China has already called for restraint from both sides, and I expect the Russians to have similar calls soon. Now, just to add to the fire, France has decided they're going to deploy their upgraded Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier to the Indian Ocean next month. Now, the worrying thing is, if this goes nuclear. Now, it wouldn't be a doomsday scenario, but it would, like, the US and Russia, okay, the world's gonna end if we go to war. But hundreds of millions of people would die as a result from this. In India, in Pakistan, in China, in Southeast Asia, which, interesting enough, is where our president just was. I mean, good thing they avoided nuclear war then. But also keep in mind, US troops are very close by. Afghanistan borders Pakistan.
Yes. There is a lot of potential because this is a conflict that's been going on between Pakistan and India for some time. There was 71. Uh,
1947, if you want to get that technical.
yeah, and 99, when briefly Pakistan took over Kashmir, uh, pretending to be paramilitary groups when it was actual official Pakistani forces.
Those are the real little green
Uh,
men.
exactly. And anyways, India booted them out. Uh, I don't know if there's a long-term resolution for this, but I think things have calmed down, which I'm happy to say from what I've been reading. Uh, the other thing is right now Pakistan has a kind of a symbolic victory over India. I also don't believe the story, by the way, that India was just blowing up trees. It's possible. We might never know, but I kind of doubt that. However, that's not the main issue. The main issue is Pakistan down Indian jets, and these are all MiG 21s. It was the F-16s that for Pakistan that downed them, and I think Pakistan is aware from the outside. It looks like a smaller, younger boy has just punched like a sophomore or a young man in the face and gotten away with it. And uh, so I would say that that's going to make the situation difficult for Modi. His election is still a ways, but it's this year, and he can't afford to look weak. People are speculating that he'll only win a minority government in a best case scenario. So at the moment, Pakistan, in a sense, has the edge.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of amazing since going into this, pretty much when it comes to most world conflicts, I have a side I root for. Like Russia versus Ukraine, I thought Russians were in the right. Of course, the Syrian conflict, you all know my views on that. But pretty much anytime there's a conflict like this, I see somebody who's clear in the right. Right here, I see two countries I don't like very much going at each other, and my only concern is I hope they don't break out the nukes. And honestly, aside from that, have fun.
Yeah, I wouldn't even. I'm not rooting for anybody. I just don't want them because some of the footage is it's hot. It's downright going on. Someone was tweeting and joking that like this is going to be put on TikTok but that was very funny. Uh, but yeah, I'm with you. I don't want to see an escalation to this. But the pressure is on Modi, not on Pakistan right now.
Yeah, and like
From a, I'm as disinterested except for you know except for the nuclear question as much as you.
yeah, it's like just keep the nukes. You guys can beat up on each other as much as you want. Just leave us out of it. Now, I will say this. As I said during my little spiel, a lot of people I think are missing the Russia-China factor. I mean, you look at it. Pakistan clearly with China. India clear with Russia. And yeah, Putin and Xi aren't going to start fighting each other over this. They're not in that kind of position where they can have these kind of internal disputes within, I guess you could say, their quote unquote bloc. So I actually, believe it or not, have faith in Putin and Xi Jinping. I mean, more so, I have faith in Xi Jinping. That may come as a surprise. I think they are actually in a position where they could really stem this conflict. And honestly, who would have thought that China would be the hero at the end of the day?
Yeah, this really came out of nowhere. It'll be interesting to see how it affects China and Russia. In a sense, I think that's probably the bigger question, given the idea that they are going to settle this somehow and quickly. It might indicate future tensions between China and Russia, but at the moment, I think China and Russia are too well invested with one another to let something like this, tear up their partnership. They rely on each other far more than they rely on Pakistan and India.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I said, if we take the most generous interpretation of the Russian-Chinese relationship that they actually are cozy with each other, it's definitely not going to tear them apart. But if we take the most, like the least generous interpretation, where oh yeah, they fucking hate each other, but they're going to shake hands because they're not really in a position to go at each other. They're not going. Again, they're not going to break it up over a petty dispute between two of their, I guess, say subservient states. I suppose that's a somewhat accurate term. But the interesting thing is, another thing I saw is this was pretty much a face-off between last generation U.S. technology and last generation Russian technology. And because you got to keep in mind, up until recently, Pakistan was pretty solidly within the U.S. sphere. It was actually, one of the few things Trump has. I'm not going to disparage Trump too much, but one of the things he's gotten right is he cut aid to Pakistan and he severed some of our ties with Pakistan. But you got to keep in mind, under Bush, Obama, Clinton, so on and so forth, Pakistan was getting surplus U.S. technology. They were getting U.S. aid. And India, they were closer to the Soviet Union, so they were getting surplus Soviet stuff. So it was really,
Yeah.
it was interesting to see the face-off between U.S. and Russian technology, at least from that front. And yeah, I bet those Indians, I bet they were wishing they ordered the S-400s. I bet they wish they got the express shipping.
Yeah. Yeah, this didn't end well for India's jets. But from what I hear, the pilot. This, of course, a debate whether there were two pilots or not, or whether there were two jets or not. But apparently, the pilot, if he is the only one, then he is still alive. And from what I hear, he's in good shape. And Pakistan has asked India, "Would you like a peace deal now?" Like there's a lot of hidden bravado here.
Yeah, but I will say this. A lot of people saw like, oh look, these countries with like 85 IQ have nuclear weapons pointing at each other. You got to keep in mind, okay, yeah, the people may not be the most advanced, most intelligent, but the people in power, I'm not going to say they're geniuses, but they're probably going to be smarter than the average person in their respective countries.
Yeah, way, way to bring up the caste system.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, indeed, and yeah, I think cooler heads will prevail. I think there's even there are other countries who are probably on the phone on giving them strong advice about what to do.
yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, of course, the summit with in Vietnam just had to happen during this. But again, we'll get into that at the end of the show. But
yeah,
just as an aside about India, I'm interested to see the. I mean, see people say superpower 2020. Pretty much everyone has rightly so dismissed this as a joke at this point, especially after what just happened now. But what I'm interested to see is how viable
yeah,
is the Indian political union? Because you got to consider how multi-ethnic it is. You got to consider that you go to one state, it's a completely different language family, not even a completely different language. And the thing is, if India were to get
yeah.
itself invested into a deeper conflict, even barring the use of nuclear weapons, would the political union that is the modern Indian state last?
Sorry, you were breaking up there.
Um, my question is, if India were to actually get into a long, protracted conflict, would the political union that is the state of India last?
Right, right. I see what you mean. Well, how will right, because Pakistan doesn't have to worry about some large Hindu minority, whereas India does. It could destabilize India far more. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, the most Pakistan has to worry about is some tribal like Balochi groups or whatever they are that like kind of like in that area that borders Iran. But other than that, yeah, like if a protracted conflict or crisis breaks out, India as a political union probably isn't going to last. Now, I did mention U.S. troops being in Afghanistan and how close they are to a potential nuclear war. Now, fortunately, there have been reports of a new Pentagon plan to withdraw all U.S. forces within 5 years. Now, this is on top of withdrawing about half of the 14,000 already stationed there over the next few months. We talked about this back in December. It seems more plausible than our Syria withdrawal, which we'll get into. But the goal is they want to remove all U.S. forces by 2024. Now, this, however, does echo Obama's repeated calls like, we'll be out of Afghanistan by 2014, we'll be out of Afghanistan by 2015. And lo and behold, U.S. troops are still there. It does remind me a bit of that.
Yeah, I mean it's not building a lot of trust, and we've been used to this for a few decades now. Uh, I mean, of course, there's a lot of problems with our civilization, as it were. Uh, I don't know what it's going to take to leave to leave permanently. Uh, I myself am skeptical. I think there's going to be probably a small force in Afghanistan, Iraq, uh, for the next 4 years. Let's say by the next uh, approaching the next primaries.
Yeah. Now,
I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to say.
I would definitely agree. Now, I will say this. Now, pretty much it's come to the point where if the U.S. says it's withdrawing from somewhere, that means we're leaving our official forces, but we're leaving behind an entire army of mercenaries. So that's something to keep in mind whenever you hear about U.S. withdrawal from any theater.
Right. That's a very good point. They're going to have to depend on mercenaries even more so. Which long term is not an ideal situation.
Yeah, and looking at the economic state of America and the world and the way things are shifting, again, American mercenaries are going to be there as long as they get their paychecks, which who knows how long that'll be. But I will say this: on a more slightly optimistic note, the continuing negotiations with the Taliban they've continued over the past several months. Now, going back on the Afghanistan withdrawal is going to be much harder than it is with Syria. It's going to be much harder to withdraw those promises. Withdraw those promises. No pun intended. Than it is in Afghanistan, because after 17 years, actually, I saw this report that pretty much the first soldiers born after 9/11 are now being deployed to Afghanistan. And again, the American people are a lot more weary of American intervention in Afghanistan, so it's going to be harder to renege the promise of getting out of there, even if it's just in part.
Yeah, I agree. And in some ways, I see Afghanistan in 9/11 as something that can be used almost in perpetuity for regime change, a kind of an American Holocaust, if you will. Right.
Absolutely. I mean, we just dug up some information. Osama bin Laden was connected to Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus. We got to go into Belarus. Like they'll stretch it that far and probably use it until again this country falls apart, which unfortunately
highly photoshopped.
Yeah, like,
highly photoshopped Osama bin Laden in a Belarusian wheat field.
I think it probably will come to that at some point. They'll try to tie it to. They'll try to tie it, again. A better example. I don't know how I missed this one. Maduro. Maduro did 9/11.
Oh my god. I just love it, and they say Alex Jones is a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, he talked about the fact that we're poisoning our water supply. He must be the conspiracy theorist. But again, the United States government would never lie to you. Now, on a more pessimistic note, we have to talk about Syria. Now, the U.S. has decided to leave behind 500 troops in our withdrawal from Syria. Now, the question is, as I said earlier, how many mercenaries are we keeping there? Now, I will say this. A force of 500 can only be staying for one of three reasons. Maybe a combination of the three, maybe two of the three, who knows. But number one is a cover for the mercenaries operating in Syria. Number two is training our quote-unquote allies, the quote-unquote moderate rebels. Or number three is a tripwire for a false flag. Now, I will say this. I would bet on one and or two, probably the combination between one and two, because I don't think they would risk number three, because it would probably have the opposite desired effect. I mean, you look. There's been reports like things have been stepping up in Syria, which you can speculate about. You'll see every few days. Oh, American soldier killed by ISIS attack in Syria. American soldier killed by X, Y, or Z in Syria. The people's reaction, it's not like, oh, we need to avenge them. It's like, oh, why were they still there? This is tragic. So I doubt they're going to try to pull number three, but I can see them still pulling one and two. Covering up for mercenary operations, training, whatever proxy group we're supporting that week.
Yeah, I can see them training various terrorist cells to blow up the odd market in Damascus and so on, or in Aleppo. The only way I could see a number three happening if it's like a 1-2 punch, that is, Putin is implicated in something, and then something happens to them that ties Putin in, and they go in. But that's pretty elaborate. I agree with you. 1 and 2 are plausible, but 3 not so much.
Yeah, like I said, if they're going to do a false flag, which, as we said, over the past years have had diminishing returns, even in Venezuela, which we'll get into, they will not do it to American soldiers. Not out of any kind of morality or what's right or wrong, but they know it'll have the opposite of desired effect. You'll have people who usually probably didn't even know we're in Syria saying, why are American troops getting killed on a foreign battlefield? It'll completely backfire on them if they try that. And I think, as dumb, as arrogant as the neocons are, I think they probably have some sense, at least a little bit, on how to not completely botch their plans.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a very different climate than after 9/11. That was another period in time where the country was very divided, very politically divided, again along, Dem Republican lines, and the event did have a unifying factor, but its ability to continue to do that is greatly diminished. There doesn't seem to be any success, and I would agree with you that we're long past that now.
Now, I will say one optimistic note to try to just make this make it feel a little bit better is, regardless of Trump being completely stymied on this, and regardless of the fact that John Bolton pretty much won at the end of the day, this is still a 75% reduction of troops. We still have 1,500 Americans getting out of a war zone. So at the end of the day, I'm not happy, but I'll take anything I can get at this point.
Right, and 500 could uh, it could be an act of leverage at the moment. It's going to be difficult to see. If, for instance, there is an attack and it's tied to those 500 troops, that's not going to play very well. So it can very much backfire. And the so-called rebels that they're supporting are, I mean, fundamentally they're not different uh, than ISIS. Uh, their differences are some small formal distance differences.
Yeah, we want to control the territory that is Syria. Oh, we want to control Iraq and Syria. Oh, we want to control the entire Middle East. We all believe the same thing. We just don't believe that it should. We just don't agree on borders.
Yeah, and you can see the uptick in concern for Israel and criticizing Israel. That, in a way, that's directly related to what's happening in Syria. There is a sense that Syria's lost, that Assad is going to stay in there, uh, that it's taken too long. This is a war that's been going on for 8 years now. And I would argue that the dividends are even more meager than Iraq.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, so I would say that the longer they stay, the worse they look.
Now, I will say this. You brought up how, more so recently, Israel's been mentioned. Oh, Trump saying, oh, we have to look out for our allies in the region, and he actually will specifically name Israel. Now, whether Trump is saying that as like a middle finger to his base, like saying, haha, I don't care about you guys, or whether it's some elaborate 40 chess, or whether it's just like a slip of the tongue, which who knows. Anyway, no matter how this information got out, it's very telling. It debunks a lot of the like, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. We're there for our own interest, not the interest of any foreign state. When you had the president directly saying, oh, yeah, we're helping the Israelis in Syria accomplish their goals, again, no matter what context said under, no matter what his intention was, it speaks to the right people and it confirms a lot of things. Similar, I go back to this all the time. APAC last year, 2018 APAC conference, Mike Pence said the winds are changing. Arab Gulf states are now finding common ground with Israel, something that's been an open secret for years, but something that the U.S. vice president finally said. Again, it was very telling. Now, whether he did it on purpose, whether it was some 40 chess, who the hell knows? Point being is, the words being said, that's what matters.
Yeah, I would agree. I think those Gulf states and Israel alliance, or let's say the friendlier terms that they're on, I don't know how permanent they are. I think even Israel doubts that. However, the writing is in the wall that America cannot. They simply cannot oust Assad, and they cannot take over. They can't, from a logistics point of view, they can't commit the troops required to do it uh, because there isn't support at home. And with what they've been doing for 8 years, it's proven unreliable. Like their only option now is to sort of continue what they've been doing for 8 years indefinitely. Uh, but how effective will that be with just 500 troops? I don't know.
Yeah, and yeah, just to go back a little, it's interesting that you said like, yeah, the Arab Gulf states and Israel probably realized that it's a marriage of convenience. Actually, interesting enough, we said this back when some more fear mongering about Iran was going around back last summer. I pretty much said like, yeah, I think in a way Israel almost wants Iran to remain a, I guess you could say, threat because they know if Iran falls, it's going to immediately turn into Israel versus Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Because Saudi Arabia seems as concerned about Iran as Israel does. It isn't, however, doing anything about it, primarily because they both belong in the Islamic world, and yes, we know the differences between Sunni and Shia, but Shia also go to Mecca and so on, and it's a much more delicate relationship. It's more complicated. Israel's relationship is not in that sense
Yeah,
as
I
complicated.
mean, it's almost returned to the Mexican standoff we had when it was Saddam's Iraq, Israel, and Iran, like right after the Iran-Iraq War, where none of them would want to touch each other because they wouldn't want a full shootout. And you could almost argue Saudi Arabia has, ironically enough, filled the place of Saddam in that.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. That's a good point.
So,
Another good point.
so I think it's interesting. As much as the three hate each other, none of them want to do anything about each other because they know it would be worse. However, they tried to get the U.S. to do something to the other one. Again, it's like they're just waiting for one of them to shoot first so they can kill the other two.
Yeah.
I mean, that's ultimately what it has boiled down to. And
And,
yeah,
and and we shouldn't forget that the Gulf states have lost Qatar.
oh,
That's very significant.
oh yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, that went through actually on the first of the year. Now, I will say this one last point on Syria is pretty much, yeah, the U.S. strategy at this point, all we can do is we can either completely abandon it, which, Trump tried to do, didn't really work out, or we can keep on the policy we've been doing for almost a decade at this point. One third very far fetched option I do not see happening is we could try to force a Kurdish state. We could try to say, oh, we support the sovereignty of the Kurds, but that risk is pissing off Turkey, who, again, we're in a very delicate spot with, especially with the Turkish Russian relations being the way they are. That would also piss off Iraq, which again, with the whole Iran thing, the Iraq-Irani relationship is weird. So again, it would be a daring move. I mean, because I know Israel has come out in support of Kurdish independence for obvious reasons, but again, if the U.S. wanted to like pull one wild card, try one new strategy, they could always try the we support Kurdish sovereignty in Syria, which again, I severely doubt that will happen, but who knows at this point.
Yeah, I would agree. It's very doubtful, especially I don't want to wander off topic, but considering Turkey's backing of Maduro, there's a very strong alignment between Turkey and Russia that's has been forming for a year now, and Turkey has a good hand in this game. So I don't see a Kurdish state happening. Not really. Uh, Israel can't make it happen, and it would take too much for America to try to make it happen. So, yeah, I don't think it will.
Yeah, I mean, even like the most ardent of neocons, even your John Boltons, the usual suspects aren't going to support a Kurdish state. Again, at least at this point, maybe if U.S.-Turkish relations deteriorate to like terrible levels, it may. But again, in the near future, I don't see it happening. But speaking of Israel, we have some good news about our good friend Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, he has been indicted on 3 counts of bribery and fraud. Now, this is the first time an Israeli prime minister has ever been indicted, apparently. Now, this is no surprise. People have murmured about this for months. And again, we all knew the guy was corrupt. You look at the actions of his wife. I could go on about this all day. I want to keep this brief, though, since there's more news I want to get into. But again, this is just honestly hilarious because you also have to consider Israeli elections are coming up in April, so almost a month away. And my prediction about Netanyahu not remaining in power seems to be panning out more and more every time we talk about anything involving Israel.
Yeah, I don't see him getting better than minority government. Uh, there's a special loss of confidence in him. Uh, but April is still coming. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't know. Maybe you know. When will the court proceedings begin? Uh, and how will they interfere with the run up to the election?
I'm not sure. I just saw the headline about it. That they said more details would come, and I didn't have the time before the show started to
Yeah.
actually look into it. But the other thing is, you got to notice the last Israeli strike on Syria, I believe, was January 21st. So it's been like 5 weeks since there's been a strike on Syria, at least last I checked. So maybe he's getting
Yeah,
worried
what
about
the hell,
something.
Israel? What's going on? Yeah, 5 weeks. That's pretty significant.
I think that's a new record. Like ever since like last April, they've been striking like at least every 3 weeks.
Yeah, yeah, I would say I would agree. I guess it's. I mean, perhaps the election. I think the election probably has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, and I'm also
Uh,
curious. I haven't heard many reports, but there's been murmurs that Assad finally got the S-300s from Russia. He finally got them out of him. Now I know like that's pretty much been confirmed, but I don't know whether he's actually deployed them yet. I mean that could be a factor that Israel doesn't want to go up against the S-300s, especially in the lead up to election, especially with their track record against the S-200s.
right, because I think they've downed already one or two aircraft, including an F-16.
Yeah, and how many missiles? I mean, again, probably more than we have time to count right now. But
Right, and then and of course there's two tactics that the Israelis tend to use. One is they fire from a distance technically outside of Syria, and this presents a legal challenge.
yeah, they fire over
Number
Lebanon a
two,
lot.
that's right, and the other, of course, is they fly, shadowing. This is so cynical, shadowing pedestrian aircraft,
Oh
like
yeah,
civilian aircraft.
they did it with the Russian spy plane, which happened back in September. They did it on Christmas Day of all days.
It's so, oh Lord,
It's so typical.
it's so
Every who,
disgusting.
yeah, who would have guessed that Israel of all people would have done that? I mean, I'm sorry you people don't celebrate Christmas. Just get Chinese food like the rest of the people who don't celebrate Christmas. You don't need to bomb Syria.
Yeah, yeah. Why did it go so bad in the Warsaw?
Yeah, I mean, come on. But yeah, pretty much. January 21st was the last strike I've seen on Israel. And again, that was, I think, the 3 of 40 missiles. I think that was the last one they had. So that may have deterred them,
Yeah,
especially, again, going up against S-200s. I mean, that probably would have been 0 of 40 missiles if they deployed the S-300s, but who knows at this point. But point being, things have not been going well for Israel. I doubt Netanyahu will stay in power. I doubt the Likud party will even stay in power. I see them probably going for some more softer social democrat who wants to negotiate with the Palestinians or whatever. You say what you love of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but honestly, I respect the ultra-Zionists more as people looking out for their nation. I see pro-Palestinian Israelis. Honestly, I see them as kind of weak. I see them kind of how I see the open border people over here. Now, as much as I may disagree with them in principle, again, I would respect them more if they would stand up for their own nation.
right, right. Although I do see that Israel is of course, is the aggressor.
No,
They're absolutely.
absolutely.
I mean, there's just not a country in the world that could get away with this.
I mean,
Um,
Russia seized Crimea, which it's had a military presence in ever since the 18th century, and it was an international crisis. Israel, their entire thing with Palestine. I mean, the UN will throw empty resolutions, but when was the last time any concrete action was taken against Israel by any country?
right. It's not going to happen. But I do want to come back to Syria just very briefly in about uh, the anti-aircraft missiles that Syria has from Russia. In 2011, when all that Syria had were the S-200s, and this was the surgeons of the rebels. One of the first targets that they went for were anti-aircraft missiles. It seems odd, right? Since the rebels don't have jets, that they would go toward disabling uh, anti-aircraft.
It's as if they were being directed by somebody who did have jets.
Yeah, it really makes you think. Really makes you think.
No coincidences there. Definitely Turkey wasn't involved in that. 2011, different times. Definitely wasn't Israel, and definitely was not the United States of America. They had no direction from any of those countries. Trust me. Trust
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Now, I will say this. Moving on, like I said, Israel, they're probably going to get more of a softer person in power. I doubt. Again, I doubt Likud party will even stay in power. Not even Netanyahu just getting out. But I do want to move on to a little bit of Europe news now. Um, Poland is now in the crosshairs of global homo, even more so than they have been previously, because now Soros-owned media outlets. I know Soros gets thrown around a lot, but these are actually Soros-owned media outlets are in Poland have been ramping up anti-PIS, which is the ruling party. They've been ramping up rhetoric against them ahead of crucial polls, specifically in the lead up to the European Parliament elections, which we were talking about at length last week. Now, I do have to say, I don't think it's for the actual propaganda, but I think it's actually an odd way to try to bait Poland into taking action, so then the international community can cry they're suppressing the free media, they're suppressing the free press, or whatever
Yeah,
they're going to say. Now, my advice is, I want to say very brief on this topic. Poland has to move quickly and decisively, like Hungary did, like Orban did, I believe, actually in 2017, 2018. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I fear Poland has missed its window of opportunity, and I hope the people are smart enough to resist whatever's going on now.
yeah. There's other deadlines that are coming up for Poland, and not the least of which is their contract for gas with Gazprom in Russia in 2022. Ukraine's ends this year, at the end of this year. Nord Stream 2 looks like it's going. So they will have to buy gas from Germany. I think Russia's in such a great position right now to dictate the prices that Poland is running out of room. And you can tell that Orban was very, very strategic, very quick thinking, knew exactly how to play Russia off against the EU, NATO, and I'm not seeing that same kind of speed and stealthiness that Orban showed. So that might have to do with the history and the animosity that Poland has with Russia. But I don't think they can even play the wild card right now. I
I do have to say, just in general, I think Poland, I don't know if this would be the right term for it, but I think they have a bit of a geopolitical Stockholm syndrome. I think they want to be dominated by a foreign power because that's how it's been for so long. And that's why they've been like trying to be so close to Trump in the US, and they want like a US military presence there. Yeah, I mean, because they spent the past 300 years dominated by Germany, Russia, Austria, and various other powers. I think something in the Polish psyche, just like whether it's in their people or the leaders in power, I think they want the domination and direction of a foreign power, no matter who it is.
Yeah, that's. I mean, but so does Hungary's in a very similar position, and you could argue that so is Austria to some degree. There's many European countries that are in the same position, and I completely agree with you. I just think that they're not acting swiftly enough, and at the same time, they're giving mixed messages. When Pence was in Poland, the reception was absolutely dead. I mean, the videos show like no one is clapping. I mean, it was a please clap moment. Sadly, for Pence said, I bring greetings from our president Donald Trump. And nothing.
Yeah, I mean the relatively like neutral reaction to Pence, like the point where they even care. The complete falling out they have with Israel. I mean Poland, it's in a crucial spot, and again, you can see the concern around it when you hear a lot of the establishment, more conservatives, talking about Poland. They'll try to stroke the Polish nationalism and say, "Oh, look how great they are! They're defending their country, but please be a vassal of the United States." They'll do that, but again, you can tell they're very concerned with that entire anti-Iran summit was a complete like at the end of the day, complete failure.
Totally,
Nobody cared about the
totally
Iranian
failed.
issue. I mean, people looked at like I think it was Pence who was talking about the Iran issue. Nobody there cared. Poland had their falling out with Israel. It's not going well for the powers that be, at least in that regard.
Yeah, and you know what? This is a positive outcome, including for Poland, because Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Czechia don't need to be involved to this degree with what happens between America, Israel, and Iran. Uh, there's certainly, I don't believe there's any popular support for this. This is strictly geopolitics. It's strictly power play. This is what they have to do. But I thought, Pence's reception in Poland marked almost like a shift or a hand that Poland is willing to play. That's absolutely, well, I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for the Trump administration.
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying that the Visegrad Four, again, we've discussed several times over. I see a Central European bloc forming where they're not on bad terms with the Russians, but they don't want to be subservient to the Russians. They're anti-EU, and they couldn't care less about the United States. I think that's what's really starting to form, especially with the influence of someone like Orban, who you could say is pretty much the figurehead of that, and again, that pretty much represents the Hungarian foreign policy, which is being exported to those other countries within that bloc. But yeah, it's very, very interesting to watch because Poland, most people thought, again, most people think like, oh yeah, you've been dominated by foreign powers. That just 2000, the 21st century foreign power dominating you is across the ocean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think they sense that there's a dramatic power shift that's happening now. It's slow. It's well, I don't know. Calling it slow is maybe relative, but there's a tectonic quality to it, which gives the appearance of it moving slowly. But looking at the yellow vests, looking at a kind of a destabilization taking place in Western Europe, and generally speaking, Russia behaving itself quite well in the region. That especially, I think, the less of a threat that America is to Russia in Europe in the European theater, the more that opens up a space for good relations with the Visegrad Four and Russia.
Yeah, and yeah, pretty much the less belligerent the U.S. is, the less belligerent Russia is. It makes obvious sense, but I did want to get into another topic, another big news item this week, which I personally have had quite the experience with. Now, Venezuela, things have not improved there in the slightest. Now, I have no doubt all of you who will be watching this have seen the blocking of aids and the burning of aid trucks in
Oh
Venezuela,
my
and the
God.
renewed calls for intervention by Washington. We must stop the evil tyrant Maduro because he's burning the aid trucks. Now, in reference
We
to
must stop Putin from giving them aid.
oh yes, yes. The Russians, they uh, look. The Venezuelan people will not eat borscht; they will eat hamburgers. Okay, I'm sorry, Vladimir Putin. I'm sorry, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. The Venezuelan people will know the goodness of the Big Mac.
Yeah, there's a Simpsons episode here somewhere. You will eat borscht like a good socialist.
I'm,
It's borscht versus burgers. Oh my God, the chaos, the chaos.
I mean, we're reaching that levels, like to the point, like yeah, this probably isn't going to be a joke in a week. This is probably going to actually be what happens.
Yeah,
But
I don't know where to predict where this thing is going to go. I mean, uh, Guido doesn't seem to be in a very good spot right now.
I mean,
It's
who would have thought the Venezuelan people like, oh, we're already socialists, our leader's a socialist. So let's have the guy who's not only a socialist but a pro-gay Zionist. I'm sure that'll go over well.
and it's hilarious to me because Guido is basically like, what if there was a dispute over who's president of the United States and Nancy Pelosi said, I am. Like, it's literally on that level, right?
Yeah, yeah. But
It, it's just so pathetic. And the irony of a NATO ally, Turkey, siding with Russia, it's just such a shit show.
yeah,
It's
yeah. I do have to
it's
say this.
bizarre world.
In reference to intervention in Latin America, I'm generally against it. It just doesn't end well. It's something about it. I agree. We got to keep our backyard in check. Blah blah blah. Whatever. But look, if there were like some like right wing general, if there was some like Franco type of figure in Venezuela that we could put in power, I would say okay, make it swift, give the guy what he needs, he'll take power and stabilize the situation. But again, we don't have a Franco or even a Pinochet. Say what you will about him. I think more or less was better. But again, that's a discussion for a different day. As I said, we have a pro-gay Zionist socialist. That is our Pinochet in Venezuela. Okay,
Oh my. This is, these levels of global homo shouldn't even be possible.
absolutely not.
Like, I love how they have to play those chivalrous. I love how they have to mention that in order to have like the left wing bourgeoisie of the Western world support it. It's
Yeah,
like,
so Kamala Harris and Cory Booker can talk about how much they support the Venezuelan revolution.
yeah, I love the prioritization. Okay, starving is bad, right? But what about gay marriage in Venezuela?
Look, you'll starve, but at least we support our greatest ally, and you can marry marry your husband. But yeah, that's aside the point. We dragged on a bit, but in reference to the aid convoy, on a more serious note, Washington knew that it would be attacked. They knew that look, even if they did ship weapons, even if not, they knew that the Venezuelan authorities weren't going to let this through, and they wanted something to happen so they could wag their fingers at them and condemn Maduro, whatever.
Yeah, yeah. And meanwhile, aid is coming in from other countries. Like, it's like this is a very bad PR stunt. It's not. It's generally speaking not working. I. It's too soon for me to predict what's going to happen next. But I'm not seeing Brazil or Argentina or any of these countries say that. Yeah, you know what? It's going to have to become an armed conflict. None of them want it. None of them.
Because it's become such a joke. We were just, I mean, we just spent like what 5 minutes mocking the Venezuelan opposition. Nobody takes anyone in the side seriously. I mean, people take Maduro kind of seriously. Like Russia's like, okay, fine, we're in this already. We might as well help you a bit. China has the same attitude. Turkey just wants to stick it to the U.S. But again, even the people who support the opposition, nobody takes Maduro seriously.
Yeah, I mean, like it might work in America to say, and this the Venezuelan Civil War was fought for gay rights. Like that would play in America. There would be people who would scoff and laugh at it, and there were people who would be literally become more patriotic because of it. But that's not going to work in South America.
Yeah, I mean, especially like Bolsonaro, who again the media spent like 6 months saying, "Oh, gonna be so terrible for gay rights," and like, yeah, like he's gonna get on board with this guy. He just did it to stick it to the Venezuelans. But yeah, again, that's aside the point. Now, on Saturday, our wondrous Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, said the U.S. will take course to secure Venezuelan democracy soon. So who knows what that means? And he was outdone by Marco Rubio on Sunday, who pretty much
Oh
threatened
Lord.
to give Maduro the Gaddafi treatment, and pretty much anyone who was not a neocon, even people who support intervention in Venezuela, eviscerated this guy. I mean, look, Rubio basically said, "Okay, sweetie, the slave trade was actually good for Libya. You're welcome." I mean, that was pretty much what his tweet was.
Yeah, I mean, it was literally like that kind of jingoism that took over America a few years, like after 9/11 and when the war on Iraq was about to happen or it just opened up. No, I mean, that just doesn't fly anymore. You know, that kind of like we're going to win just for the sake of winning. Or, like it doesn't it doesn't give anybody like there's an element I think within American society that it does make them feel good being able to do that. That there's a sense of security that comes from being top dog. But it's costing too much to be top dog.
Yeah, most Americans look at
And
that and say, "Why is it our business? Why do we have to do this? Well, how is this helping us at all?" I mean, like, yeah, aside
yeah,
from like people who call themselves conservatives but are pretty much in line with liberals internationally. I mean, the Rubios, you think? Yeah, this is falling on deaf ears for everyone. Now, I will say I have seen many intelligent people on the right give are the Donald tier takes on the situation. They're completely willing to throw out America first nationalism in order to own the commies or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, fortunately, they're few and far between, but I've still seen it nonetheless. Now, I will say, on Twitter, the interventionists have been out in full force, and I will say I've had some personal run-ins with them. Now, the woke Latino brigades were out in full force, especially the diaspora. Now, I learned they taught me something very valuable. I learned that I, Constantine, am a communist, fascist, racist who thinks Latinos cannot learn English.
This is the kind of socialism I can get behind.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is
The racist socialist. It's oh Lord.
yeah, yeah. I'm a
Uh,
racist, fascist, socialist. Okay, I'm everything the boomer fears.
well, this is literally the asshole. Uh, yeah, I mean, what are they arguing for, really? Like, I don't. Uh, don't they look at I mean, America has like, how do they wipe out how do they wipe out the amount of sanctions that America has on Venezuela and the effect that it has on its economy, right? Like, also, America is generally speaking weeding itself off of Venezuelan oil. Like, 2018 was quite a bit lower, like at over 30% lower than 2017. So I think a lot of this is tribal. I think a lot of this is like I think these people really do look at America as the only country that can fix things, that can achieve what they want. But they I think they give America far more agency than it has.
Yeah, and again, I think this is very telling. In all seriousness, aside from my jokes about me apparently being the boomer nightmare, but the trend of diaspora run foreign policy, which has been the U.S. for about the past, I don't know, 40, 50 years, is still running strong. You always hear DIS communities. Cubans were a big one. The Vietnamese community as they start to come over. You're seeing a very strong. I mean, a lot of Arabs actually. Interesting enough, like a lot of anti-Assad Syrians in this country, they'll call for intervention. That's aside the point. And of course, our favorite group, who we are verboten from mentioning, but again, that is also aside the point. Um, it is very telling, though, like in a larger picture. America has reached the point as an empire where its minorities are beginning to govern it instead of the other way around.
Yeah, many such cases. Rome had its German emperors, and that's and like I say, they've come at the sunset, and um, America, of course, is still powerful. It's still the most powerful country in the world, and it will continue to be so for several years. But it doesn't have it can't just wave a magic wand, a magic uh, Rand Corporation wand that it just magically turns Venezuela into something that they like. They won't move back anyways.
Yeah, I
I mean,
mean,
a lot of this is really about bringing their family to America.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we have the raw power. Like you look at us on paper, we're the most powerful country in the world. But the thing is, we've squandered so much political capital, both foreign and domestically, that we can't use that power.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's especially in the last 3 4 years. It's obvious when I think the beginning of this was when Obama could not cross the red line and take out Assad. I think that spelt
Yeah, and
it.
actually,
And it,
interesting enough, in preparation for this, I actually went back and watched Obama's address asking Congress to give him authorization to go into Syria. Pretty much what he said is he wanted to do the same thing, at least what he said. He said he wanted to do the same thing, for example, like what Trump did, limited strike on certain targets that they believe chemical weapons were at. But you listen to like what he said, like he mentioned Libya. He said, "Oh, I don't want it to be a sustained campaign about Libya," even though you could kind of see like he's like saying, "Yeah, that's exactly what I want. Look, we're going to take out Assad. Trust me. We're just telling these morons on the ground that, oh yeah, it's going to be a limited strike," which again would lead to other things, a no-fly zone, whatever. But yeah, it's actually interesting to see that. Look, the one thing that defeated Obama was a Republican Congress, which is honestly just so odd to think about the fact that the warmongers in Congress didn't get behind Obama to do this. Even the people who praised the Syria strike in 2017, 2018, such as Ted Cruz, they shot down Obama on this. And again, like I said, I think that is really when American political capital started to decline because we didn't enforce our ridiculous demands.
Yeah, that's always going to be because of I don't mean to get real buggy on everybody, but I mean, of course, the Democrats are the inner party and the Republicans are the outer party. I mean, it's been that way for long, long time. Especially, what Moltmann always said was, uh, a Republican can go into office, but he cannot go into power. So it does seem odd to me, like this is a kind of an exception to the rule that the Republicans didn't back Obama on this. You know, what were the reasons exactly? Was it that they wanted the glory for themselves? Because of course, or maybe they knew that support for this war, especially after the Libya being such a disaster for so many, that maybe it wasn't worth it. Maybe, like you say, America played one of its last political hands
Well,
and couldn't get the consensus.
not to get too much off topic, but I'm curious in that case if they miscalculated Russia's role in this. Because keep in mind, before actually that incident, the 2013 chemical attacks, Russia, yeah, they support Syria, they gave them weapons, but they didn't get directly involved and advocate on Syria's behalf, both diplomatically and militarily, until the U.S. threatened to get involved. So I'm wondering, like, if that's just something they miscalculated and they realized, oh, yeah, we can't go head to head with Russia because, again, that's going to be disaster for everyone. Even the most ardent of neocons realized that direct confrontation between the U.S. and Russia would spell disaster for the entire planet. So I'm wondering, if that's just something that they didn't take into account and they decided, look, there's other ways we can do this, and for now, sorry, Obama, you don't get to strike Syria.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. Logistically, also for Russia, Syria is far more important than Libya was. I think what can't rule out that the mapping of the coup in Ukraine in 2013 was well underway because the riots and the protesting in Kiev were occurring at the end of 2013, and
Yeah,
then
it actually started like a month after the entire debacle over Syria.
yes. So I think there was an idea that Russia would be very preoccupied anyways, and that going in wouldn't be necessary. That the rebels would eventually make short work of Assad, and because it really did look like the rebels would win,
Oh yeah, I mean,
or
yeah, the first few years
ISIS,
of the war were
rather ISIS would
terrible.
win because they controlled far more territory than the rebels did. But that didn't happen. So yeah, that was a shock. I think no one is more shocked than the West at the outcome.
Now, to get back on topic about Venezuela, fortunately, good news I've seen out of this is people on our side, you think mainly Tucker Carlson and Coulter, have both come out against intervention in Venezuela. Tucker did it, I believe. Believe it was last week. He had the one former military officer he always has on whenever he wants to make an anti-war point. So that went over well. And Coulter has been going on about it, saying like, again, we're just going to put in another socialist who hates us. So it's nice to see now the points we have been saying for the past several weeks are starting to make their way to, I guess, say, our people in power.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's perhaps the best thing that has come out of this is just how anti-war the Republican Party has become. Uh, I'm sure the Democrats look at them as traitors. You're just doing exactly what Putin wants. Like it's all of that nonsense all over again. Like in the way that they can't acknowledge the effort that Trump is trying to do with Kim Jong Un because it's Blumph doing it. It's in a similar way. I mean, because they feel ripped off. They feel like Hillary should have been president.
Yeah, and just one thing I will say, you mentioned Putin. I think the worst, probably standard like establishment conservative take out of this, like, oh look at all these leftists supporting a Putin-backed dictator. That's probably been the worst take I've seen out of this entire Venezuela thing.
I know.
It's like, come on, I don't want World War III. We voted for Trump to fix relations with the guy. Come on, but one last point on Venezuela before we close out the show with the Kim Jong Un summit. It's estimated that destabilization in Venezuela, U.S. led regime change, whether directly or indirectly, would lead to 8 million people being displaced. Guess where they would go?
Uh, yeah, hello.
Texas and Florida. Hello, thank you. Welcome your new diverse neighbors. Look, they'll definitely vote Democrat. No, not Democrat. They'll definitely vote Republican. Trust us. They'll vote for Ted Cruz. They'll stand behind a true principled conservative.
Yeah, yeah, they're not going to vote for politics that appeal to their will to power. Like that will never happen.
Oh, absolutely not. Again, they're natural conservatives. They lived through socialism that they definitely did not vote for. Trust us. They definitely didn't vote overwhelmingly for this. Several times. So
Right.
they'll be the most right wing free market Republicans there ever were.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like there's as if they're not clever enough to to politically navigate this country in a way that suits them better as a group. It's just ridiculous. And also, like, getting involved doesn't leave America in a moral standing. Like, you're going to push for a violent regime change, and that you're not going to take. It's such a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's actually how we ended up with MS-13. We didn't stir things up in El Salvador, but we got involved after things were stirred up, which of course it led to the compassionate conservatives wanting to take in all these refugees. I mean, that was actually under Bush, no surprise. And then, oh, all of a sudden we have this violent, dangerous gang roaming the streets of even Virginia. Wow, who would have seen that one coming?
you know, it's so patently ridiculous. So hopefully, I don't know. I hope they withdraw. Like, I just hope this remains a botched coup.
Yeah, hopefully, even though, again, I joked about 2 million refugees. Now, like, again, they're saying 8 million, which, again, the vast majority would probably come here. But let's end on a semi positive note. The Hanoi summit was yesterday and today. So on Tuesday, Trump arrived in Hanoi, Vietnam, with Kim Jong Un. Actually, interesting. I did not know Kim Jong Un smoked. That was actually a very interesting thing to see from all the photo ops they were doing. But the Vietnamese population, actually, before the summit, was very positive to the fact that their country was hosting the summit, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's very interesting to watch the Vietnamese people, even the diaspora in the United States. They don't hold a grudge against the United States over the Vietnam War, which was completely butcherous. I mean, look, America lost 6,000 people, and that's how much America lost. The Vietnamese, they lost millions, yet you ask them about America, very rarely, I mean, you'll find some, but most of them don't hold any grudges against it, which I find pretty remarkable. I mean, and when they asked them about like the something happening, they said like, "Oh yeah, I just hope for peace. I just want things to be worked out. I just want one less war zone in the world."
Yeah, that's right. And they're conflicted in the sense that, immediately after Vietnam's war with America, Vietnam had a war with China and also defeated China. So, like the Philippines and other countries, they're a small power. They easily punch above their weight, but they need the ability to balance one power against another.
Yeah, and I say like just the fact that they were hosting the summit, which yeah, somebody said, I can't remember who, that yeah, U.S. negotiations with North Korea pretty much are by default U.S. negotiations with China, and you have Vietnam pretty much oscillating between the two, especially in recent years.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting. Now, unfortunately, the summit did not go like the Singapore one. It ended early and in deadlock. Now, I cannot say I'm surprised it ended this way. I didn't expect the warm feelings that they had in the summer. I didn't expect the very first summit where they're all smiley and handshaky. Now,
Yeah.
not to sing the praises of Reagan, because again, Reagan I have more or less negative thoughts on, but he had his few things, especially diplomatically. He had his successes. But you have to remember, it took him 4 summits with Gorbachev before any formal agreements were reached.
Right. I think also from what I've been reading, from what I understand, uh, and we have to like acknowledge Trump has had some success with some detainees being freed and some reduction in protection of these missiles being in place. However, it's not as successful as Trump's move against China for trade. From what I've read, he didn't listen to his advisors. I think he was going in very confident that there would be a deal, despite the fact that his staff was saying that I think it was Pompeo who was saying that I'm not feeling anything.
Yeah, and
Um,
Pompeo, as much as I disparage the guy, I think the one thing he's got his head screwed on straight is with the Korea issue. He's met with Kim Jong Un more than Trump has.
yeah, and I think Kim Jong Un felt he could ask this of Trump because Trump keeps flying halfway around the world to meet with him, and so this gives him a very sort of bloated sense of confidence. Like Trump is trying to accommodate the uniqueness of Asian civilization, Asian culture, and meet them at their home, as it were.
Yeah,
Uh, but I think Kim Jong Un might be reading this the wrong way. I can't say exactly one way or another, but
and I do have a bit of an interesting take. I think, I mean, look, Trump, like, people will say, like, oh, pulling out of the INF may have made Kim nervous. Trump's actions in Venezuela may have made Kim nervous. I can admit that. I can say, like, yeah, that's probably something. But I will say, I think Trump's domestic failures, I think his failures to reach a deal on the wall, I think him giving up on the government shutdown, I think a lot of the domestic things he's done where he's caved has probably emboldened people internationally. They say, if he can't make a deal with his own people, what makes you think we can't push him around like the Democrats push him around?
excellent point. Excellent point. They're all watching this. I mean, there was an article, I think in 2000, late 2017, where the Chinese coined a phrase for Western liberals.
The Baizhou or whatever it is.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, that was extraordinary. That was absolutely hilarious, right? So they're watching this cultural struggle, this cultural war taking place in America and the West, and as we predicted in the past, that this will give them leverage. It will give other countries leverage
Yeah, I mean, again,
because it will make them confident
like I
that
said, if he can't crack a deal with Chuck
you
Schumer and
can't
Nancy
you
Pelosi of all
can't
people,
enforce your will abroad when at home there's division.
yeah,
So
I mean, hell, it goes beyond that. When he can't enforce his will within his own party, it's going to make him look weak on the international stage, unfortunately. But again, I do think that probably the whole government shutdown debacle just a month before this summit probably
hello.
gave. Hello? Am I there? Testing, testing.
Yep, yep. I can hear you.
Oh, sorry. Technical
Go ahead.
difficulties even when we're not live. Amazing.
Yeah, I can hear you.
But okay, so I will to continue on. The deadlock was caused by Kim requesting the lifting of sanctions. Now, fortunately, the summit happened mostly, even though Trump left like about half a day early. I'm not too concerned about this, though. As I said last week, Trump is still in control of his East Asia policy. Walking away is a negotiating tactic, especially between Trump and Kim. Although North Korea did not say they were willing, although North Korea actually did say they were willing to dismantle the Yongbyon test site, which was a nuclear test site, in exchange for lifting some sanctions.
Right. Well, I mean, Kim wanted all the sanctions lifted. That's what I understand. It is both sides are contesting exactly what happened, but I think as long as there isn't a row over this, and I don't think there will be, uh, the possibility of another summit meeting is definite. So it remains to be seen.
Yeah,
Uh,
and
we
fortunately, that statement about the dismantling the site came after Trump walked out, so they're not on too bad of terms with each other, even though the meeting was ended abruptly.
yeah.
Now, I do
That's what I got out of
I
it
do
as
have to
well.
say, regardless of how these talks went in particular, the past year of progress since January 2018 has been remarkable, especially between the two Koreas. The fact that North Korea and South Korea have still continued their cooperation, there hasn't been any fallout between Moon and Kim, the fact that they're reconnecting railways, dismantling some sites on the DMZ, that's what matters. If Trump and Kim can't reach a settlement in one meeting, who cares compared to that? Now, I do have to say one last thing about this. Trump's detractors have been absolutely hilarious. On Tuesday, when Trump first arrived, they said he would be weak and make concessions to Kim and make the U.S. look weak. And now they criticize him for walking away without a deal.
You're breaking up, Constantine.
I pretty much said, yeah, they criticized him for walking away without a deal after saying he would be weak and capitulate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Trump is going to capitulate. Trump will not, in the end, I think, make a deal that he considers a bad deal. There may be no deal. Like, I think that's the distinct possibility that there might not be a deal. But I don't think that this is. I don't think Trump is going to make a bad deal.
I agree, and like I said, fortunately, Trump has control over his Asia policy. So now that's all I have to say. And seeing as my internet is cutting out, I think I'm going to bring the program to a close. But overall, very eventful week, especially considering the fact we were almost brought to the brink of nuclear war over a bombed terrorist camp. But again, it turns out, you know, Pakistan, they just had to send Bobs and Regine. That's all they had to do. They could have prevented this all. Thank you very much, Pakistan. You've ended the world because you did not satisfy India. And yeah, we'll remember this. We'll remember this when we're in the bunkers. Okay. So I'm gonna end it here. Thank you all for tuning in. I know this is actually
Thank you, guys.
a bit of an old format. We haven't done a pre-recorded episode in quite some time. Hopefully this works out, and if not, I had fun either way. But see you guys next
Same
time,
here.
and goodbye.